Ladies and gentlemen, we are officially live and the session has started. It's always a little bit weird to start these because you don't know when they're live and when they are not. But we know right now that we are live, and I am super excited about today's session. And we have some early birds here, people that are showing up 3-4 minutes early. And to you, I say, job well done. It's awesome that you're showing up here. And also fun to have Casey in the chat area. So just a little update for those of you that have never attended one of our boot camps, how this works and how we do this. Essentially what happens is we do a pre-recorded session. And that's what's going to happen with Casey. We're going to play that in a little bit here. It's a pre-recorded session that we play for you. But this is live in real time. So we're actually interacting here. This is me. It is Thursday morning where I am. And that is St. Paul, Minnesota. But I would love to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? And this is the other thing I want to know. What is your drink of choice? So let me know where you are tuning in from, your drink of choice, and one thing that you're especially excited to learn about in today's bootcamp. I am super excited to share this conversation that I had with Casey with you because there are some really, really valuable lessons and takeaways from an SEO perspective. And one of the things that I appreciate about Casey, one of the many things I appreciate about Casey is that he backs up, he has resources that he can provide for all of the different things that he talks about. And what we're going to do is Casey and I just had a conversation, but Alexa, if we could give a round of applause to Alexa, who is the general manager for Food Blogger Pro, went in and overlaid some of the resources. So you can see as we're talking about these, what those resources actually are. And we are also going to be sending out an email at the end with information about those resources. So you can look into that on your own. But there's some things here that I know for a lot of people that it's going to be new information for you. And what I would encourage you to do is to not get overwhelmed, but to make a note of anything that you want to learn about. So if there's one thing that you're like, oh, I'm really interested in learning more about this idea of EAT, E-A-T. Make a note for that and do some research around it. Don't feel like you have to 100% understand it as you are listening, but let this session be the kind of session where you have a long running list of things that you are going to take action on and learn more about. So we are officially turning over to the start time here. I think what we'll find is we have 250 people right now that are tuning in live, and we'll have lots of people that watch after the fact as well. I think what we'll find is as we hang out here, we'll see that number creep up, probably have 300. I wouldn't be surprised if at one point we touch 400 people attending this live and lots of people watching it after the fact as well. If you haven't yet checked in and said hello, what I would love to hear is where you're tuning in from, your name and your blog name, if you have started a blog or maybe it's a social media account, and then your drink of choice this morning, or I know some people are tuning in from around the world, so this evening or this afternoon, if that's the time that it is for where you are tuning in. We are super excited about today's SEO bootcamp session. I didn't notice this, but I am wearing the same shirt that I'm wearing in all the different pre-recorded sessions. So I would like to say it's because I was so well planned, and I said I'm going to match my shirt the day we go live with the pre-recorded sessions. But in actuality, I have like 3 shirts that I rotate through, and it just happened to be that I was wearing this on those days. So we have some people tuning in from Atlanta, Colorado, As Mom Sees It from Ohio. Love that. Innocent Delight, good to see you. Beth from Pennsylvania. Katie, good to see you, Katie. We have people from all around Bemidji, Minnesota. Woo, woo, Minnesota. Love that. South Carolina. Awesome. So fun to hear from people all around the world here. We're going to be starting in just a little bit, but we're going to hang out as people come in and connect. One of the things that I love about the session here, this kind of beginning time, is a lot of times people are like, hey, I'm tuning in. We see somebody from Brazil, which is awesome. UK. This is so cool. We see people from all around the world. And sometimes what happens, even in these little chat sessions, is people connect and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were in Bemidji, Minnesota as well. And then these people are able to connect. And that's one of the biggest things that I've taken away from blogging and business building is that it's those connections that are super, super valuable and really important. So we're going to get started here in a little bit. We're going to wait a little bit longer as people trickle in. People from a handful of people from the UK, which is fun. Quebec, awesome. Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Lisa, good to see you. Florida in the house. Woot, woot. Nice. Florida. I didn't know that until like 2 years ago that the artist's name Florida is just Florida because that's where he's from. So we're going to get started in a little bit here. Casey's actually able to hang out in the chat as well. And to connect, Casey, good to have you here. And we're going to start this session in a bit here. So for those of you that aren't familiar, kind of the quick background, Food Blogger Pro is we do a podcast. Some of you might be familiar with the podcast. Can I get a woo woo if you are a podcast listener or you've ever listened to the podcast? Would be interested to see if there's anybody in the chat area that has listened to the podcast. And then what I would love to do is see if we have any current Food Blogger Pro members. Are there any people that are Food Blogger Pro members that are watching this live? Would love to hear from you. And it's always fun to connect with people, members specifically, whether it be on a chat or whether it be in person. I was at a conference and I saw that Justin was on this call and was able to connect with him. And like, it's just really fun to be able to connect with people and so fun to see these current FBP members. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yes, Jessica, Christy, awesome. Flippo, this is awesome. I'm so fun. It's so fun that we have members that are tuning in live as well. And so excited to have these conversations with you about blog building and SEO. And like I said before, I'm super excited to share this session that Casey did because there's going to be some really important SEO concepts. And the session today is called SEO Myths, User Intent in Google. And there's going to be some big takeaways from a high level perspective with SEO. In the next session with Raquel is the lead for WP Tasty. And she is the person that is like really dealing with the day-to-day stuff that's happening with WP Tasty. She's going to be talking about some of the ground level stuff as it relates to recipe SEO. And Casey's going to hit some of that too. And the good thing about any of the overlap is that some of this stuff takes multiple repeat impressions in order to really absorb it and say, okay, I'm starting to understand it now, which is going to be great. And I'm really excited to share some of this stuff with you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over and I'm just going to do a quick little intro and then we'll jump into the session. So when you can see my screen, and it's going to be just kind of a basic little keynote that you're going to be able to see. What I would love to hear you do is give me an, oh yeah, in the chat, if you can see it. And then I will know that we are good to go. And that should be coming up any second now. And once I have the good to go from you, I will kick things off and start to chat through some of the slides I have here. So today's session is with Casey Markee. Casey is the he is the SEO specialist, the expert on Food Blogger Pro, and is really involved in this niche and has a lot of, as you'll see, background and experience with this. What we're going to do here, we did some introductions. If you haven't yet introduced yourself, that would be great if you could do that. Say who you are, where you're from, what your blog is. We're going to jump into Casey's session here in just a little bit. It's called SEO Myths, User Intent, and Google with Casey. Then I'm going to talk about Food Blogger Pro. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is. And we saw that there's a bunch of people that are Food Blogger Pro members that are tuning into this, and do a little bit of a walkthrough for that. We are coming up on an enrollment season. And as a matter of fact, starting today, anybody that's attending the bootcamp can sign up to be a member of Food Blogger Pro. And we have a fun little bootcamp bundle, we're calling it, that you can get. But starting today, it's open. So if you've been waiting to sign up up for Food Blogger Pro. Actually, today is the first day that you can do that. So we're going to talk about Food Blogger Pro a little bit. So if you haven't yet, say your name, where you're watching from today, your blog or your brand name, and we would love to hear from you. A quick tip, if you are hearing lots of dings in the chat area, make sure that you mute it. There's a way that you can mute that if you don't want to hear those. And then also just make sure to sign in. You can sign in as a guest. You can use your Facebook or Twitter account, because we love to hear from people and to hear stories from people, where they're tuning in from, people that might have thoughts or questions as they come up. We would love to engage with you on the chat as the video is playing with Casey. So who are we? My name is Bjork. I have a blog that I help Lindsay run, but she does most of it, Pinch of Yum. I maybe play like a 10%, 20% role in that. Most of my time is spent with Food Blogger Pro, this community, and working with this incredible group of people. And then Casey is going to be sharing his expertise in SEO. So we have Pinch of Yum, we have Food Blogger Pro, and we have MediaWise, and that's the name of Casey's brand. And he's been doing this for a long time and building this business specifically around the SEO industry. So why is SEO important? It stands for Search Engine Optimization. And SEO is important because you're optimizing when people search something. And the cool thing is, we're going to be talking a lot about Google, but that can be true for any platform. It could be true for Pinterest. It could be true for YouTube. All of these are really important platforms to show up higher in. So as you are building content, it's important to understand how to have that content show up higher. And one of the most important platforms for that is Google. So we're going to be talking about today, kind of in general terms, speaking about Google, because that's like the dominant search platform, much more than any of the others. And while the others are search platforms and are important, it's just in general, it's like Google is the place to go, right? When we think of search, we think of Google. For recipes, why is it important? Well, the obvious thing, like I talked about, is you want to show up higher. So what does it look like to have a result that shows up in that first spot? And the other thing we're going to be talking about is this idea of rich snippets. And we're not going to dive deep into that now, but we're going to talk about why that's important and why that's valuable. Another thing that's important is Google doesn't tell us everything about how they rank sites, but they do provide really clear guidelines around certain things. And one example of that would be this idea of structured data, which we're going to talk about. And Google says this on their developers page. It says, you must follow the general structured data guidelines for your recipe to be eligible to appear in search results. And there's this little additional thing, which we're going to talk about. And it says, if you violate these policies, your recipe might not show up as a rich result, but your content will still appear in search results. But the idea being that you really want to understand this stuff so you can optimize your search results. So we're going to be talking about that. Casey's going to be talking about some of the new recipe schema changes. This idea of EAT, what that is and why it's important. It's not just EAT because we're food bloggers. It's EAT because that's something that Google has communicated about how you as a content creator can create authoritative content, and this idea of highest meets needs blog. And then the most important idea here is we want to be meeting the needs of the users that we have. So let's go ahead and jump into the session. Casey is going to be talking about SEO myths, user intent, and Google. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over. You are going to see a blank screen and me for a little bit, and then I will turn my video off, and then we will just have this session with Casey. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to switch over. I am going to pull up the video. I'm going to stay on for a little bit. And then once you can see it, give me a got it, and then I will turn my video on. Welcome to the Bootcamp.
Happy to be here, Bjork. Greetings from the, it is a little sunnier today in San Diego. That's always a joy. We have these various wildfires that spring up all the time, traffic congestion, storms that roll in and out at a moment's notice. It's really
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's try that again. This is just me. I am back. I'm going to restart that one more time so we can see if we can get the video. Let me give me one more shot here, and I'm going to switch over, and then let me know if you can see that starting.
See the Comic-Con?
They do the Comic-Con thing. But also, as much as I would love to go in depth on that, what you do day in and day out is SEO. So we've had you on the podcast a couple times, done some live Q&As with the Food Blogger Pro members, but we're doing the bootcamp today. So there's some people that are maybe have heard of you but don't know a lot about your background. So your quick story and how you got into SEO, and then specifically with food blogs and recipe sites. That's kind of the area that you've come to be an expert in. So can you talk about your quick story?
Absolutely. Quick story. So I've been doing SEO since about 1998. I was fortunate to get involved when I realized that law school wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So I met my wife. That was the best thing about law school. I transferred over to an MBA program, met a couple other people doing startups, got into the startup scene there with a couple failed websites like NextGift, others, nextgift.com, magneticmattresses.com. Good times.
Nice.
I went out on my own in about 2000 to launch MediaWise. I've been working, doing site auditing, SEO training. I've trained SEO teams on 5 different continents. Been doing this a long time. I hooked up with searchenginenews.com in about 2004, and I've been offering SEO training to them, writing articles on what is true, what is not in the SEO realm. Fortunate to contribute some content, provide some advisory info for things like the Google Search Console Advisory Board. They allow some of us to come in and kind of beta test some features, so that's always great. Cool. And I got involved in the food blogging niche, gosh, it's been 4 years ago or 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. I was asked to speak at Camp Blogaway, which is a conference that I'm not even sure that they're doing anymore, but it was located up in Big Bear. And it was during our last big wildfire. So that was interesting because they needed a speaker to come up at the last minute, and we were having a wildfire here, and I had lost my voice. So by the time I got up there, I was basically yelling to the attendees. Yeah, perfect for speaking. But that was well received. Some of the bloggers reached out and asked me to audit their sites, and the rest is history. The good thing about the food blogging niche is that it's very referral only. Mm-hmm. Once you do a good job, everyone knows about it, and even more when you do a bad job, everyone knows about it. So and that's led to, I've spoken at the Everything Food Conference, Food Bloggers Canada, the IACP, International Association of Culinary Professionals National Conference, Food Tourism Board in Canada, all over the world doing this stuff. So it's been very nice. And that's where we hooked up, right? I think, where did we met? Gosh, what was that? We met, when did we first meet?
Like a random connection, and we reached out. We were just starting up with Food Blogger Pro, and we had at Food Blogger Pro and say, here's some advice that we could give you. At that time, it was structured a little bit differently. The forums were open.
Exactly. Closed all that out. And I've been on board since, and hope you guys have continued to build a thriving community, and I'm very blessed to be a part of it. So that's the story in 5 minutes.
Cool. And excited to have you talking about, we're kind of going to break this out into 3 different sections here.
Okay.
So Raquel and I are going to be talking in the next session, kind of really diving deep into specifics around recipes and recipe SEO. So what we're going to do for this session, let's talk a little bit about some of the updates. I think if nothing else, it helps to review that stuff, even if we cover some of that down the line in the next session. I think multiple points of impact from different people is really important. And we're going to talk about user intent, and we don't have to go deep into that right now, but we're going to talk about what that is and why that's important. And then this last section, I think is going to be really great. You said it's really important that we talk about some myths. And so we're going to dispel some myths that you see.
Lots of them out there, especially in the food blogging niche.
Yeah, we have this great list of myths that we're going to talk through that will be really good for people to know as they go forward with their SEO. So we're calling it SEO myths, user intent, and Google. And those are all important things to understand. So let's start with that first section that we talked about. And these updates that are coming down the line or that have happened, and the impact of those for the recipe schema and what that looks like and why that's important for us to know about.
Absolutely. So Google continues to move the bar a little bit with regards to these structured data guidelines that they publish, and especially in the recipe niche, that's very prominent. Recently, on the 3rd of May, Google pushed out some changes to their recipe schema best practices. They introduced four new. And for those of you who are hearing unexplained noises in the background, that's my Maine Coon cat.
It's a Maine Coon.
Ziggy. Yeah, he's big. Like, he's probably going to appear in the background walking around.
That's why Casey was like, should I take my cat out? I was like, no. Yeah. Intentionally leave your cat in. Every once in a while, our dog Sage makes an appearance too. So
we'll see how that goes. He'll probably jump in anyway. So as I was saying, I apologize for the distraction there. So Google pushed out these 4 new fields. They're suggested. They recommended, as I'm using the little air quotes there, recommended. Yep. When Google recommends something, it's usually that, hey, you should probably use this. Mm-hmm. It's not a ranking factor, but nevertheless, it informs user intent. And any time that they introduce something, it's a strong signal that you should be using it. And those 4 new fields are basically recipe cuisine, recipe category, keywords, and video. And the recipe cuisine and recipe category had been built into some plugins for a while. For example, WP Tasty with you, WP Recipe Maker. Mm-hmm. Not sure about Cookbook or the other ones, but those 2 specifically have supported those categories, those fields for a while. And the next 2 are keywords and video. Both are very interesting because Google has been moving towards, voice search, and these keywords and video are very important for optimizing for voice search. And what does that mean? Well, it means that Google is pushing everyone to have a Google Assistant app directory listing. Many of you on the call probably received a notice from Google in January saying, hey, we've automatically created an app assistant directory listing for you. You don't have to do anything. But if you want to claim it and provide maybe a little bit more increased information on the category page, you should do so. So for those who on the call are like, I don't remember receiving an App Assistant directory listing from Google, go ahead and type in App Assistant Directory, Google, into Google, go up to the directory and just type in your site name. Most likely, it'll autocomplete and it'll pop up a little page, and if you haven't claimed it, there'll be a big blue link at the bottom that says claim this, and you should do that so that you can provide a little bit more detail so that Google can serve you. Well, what does this mean? Well, this is a chance for you to optimize for Google Home and Google Now and Google Digital Assistants. And Alexa, of course, also pulls some information over on that as well. So it's always a good idea to think about that. Voice search is really where Google is going. It's been that way for a while. For those of you who attended, or for those of you who might not be aware of it, Google holds a national kind of a technology conference every year called Google I/O. And it's in May of every year. And this year it'll just blow your mind. If you have the chance to type in Google I/O 2018, look at some of the videos. The voice search features that they've introduced for the Google Assistant will blow your mind. You can now schedule a hair appointment. It showed you how they have the machine learning set up now where you can say, hey, Google, schedule me a hair appointment, and it'll automatically look through your contacts. It'll automatically pull out all your information, find out where you've previously had a hair appointment, do the whole thing for you in real time. It's pretty crazy and
it's
scary.
Really amazing to watch that call. So I think it was called Google Duplex, and they made a call to a hair appointment, and it's like it sounds like a real person having the conversation. Yeah, and so for recipe creators, that's important because there is this slow and steady transition from written word that people are looking at and scrolling through to voice, where something is either spoken back to them or a video is displayed on a device activated by voice. So is that what these new updates are related to then?
Yeah, exactly. It's just recipe guidance. Google wants to continue to provide users with the dumbed down step-by-step instructions for making videos. And so what they're trying to do is allow you and users to find these recipes easier. And to do that, you have to mark up your content with specific fields that Google can then pull into we call the voice search feed, so to speak, at their end. And it's really interesting how they're going about it, because I can tell you, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, not every recipe needs a video. So this has caused a lot of consternation already to the recipe niche. Oh my goodness, does that mean I have to go and put videos and everything? Absolutely not. It means that if you have video already, there are some changes that are being made that will allow you to upload the video to your site and then take that URL and embed it in your recipe card, and then the recipe plugins themselves will make that connection and pull it together. Now, we don't necessarily know how that's going to work. So I'm just telling clients to wait a little bit. I know that you're working on adding that functionality to your own recipe card.
Yep.
Brecht over at WP Recipe Maker has already added the ability, but it only supports if you upload the video file to your site. Now, a lot of video files are pretty big. Big question I've had is, how does that impact speed? Well, less than you think, because the video doesn't play at all until you actually push the play button on the page. So then that's when the file really comes down. So on a total page weight, bottom line issue, it's not really going to affect speed much. But what it is going to affect is that, a lot of people don't have videos, or they have video files that they've already uploaded to maybe Vimeo, or they've uploaded to YouTube, and now we can't use those videos unless we download them to our site, or we have them offline, and then we upload them again to our own server. So I would wait a little bit on that. And again, like I said, not every recipe needs video. I don't need to see a video on how to make a Caesar salad. Okay, so just for if those of you on the call who are sweating this, please don't. This is just if you have the ability in the future to add video, great. Now the other fields, totally easy to add, and you should start going back through your top recipes first. You can sort those in the search queries report in Google Search Console as an example. Start at the top, work your way down, and you should fill out that keywords and those cuisine and the category fields, and they're easy to do. If you are concerned about what type of cuisine or category you should use, don't overthink it. Type in types of cuisine into Google, and it will populate at the top of the page a whole gallery on accepted worldwide cuisines. And whenever in doubt, American is a great catch-all cuisine. So just type in American and you are good to go. And then with regards to the keywords field, that's really interesting. I know a lot of people have works on that. The keywords field is not related to your focus keyword, nor is it related to the keywords tag field, which you can see under Yoast that no one uses. The keywords tag meta field hasn't been used in years. There's really no reason to fill that out. What Google is getting here specifically in this keywords field is, if you could think of 1 to 3 keywords that someone in conversation or natural language would use to surface your recipe, those are the 3 keywords to include there, or 2 keywords, or whatever you want. So if you were to go to the recipe schema page right now and you were to look at the examples, Google has JSON LD examples for everything on their recipe schema page under search. And you were to click on view those examples. If you look on the code, they provide you a couple examples. One of them is with coffee cake. So for example, if we were to go to it right now and we were to look at the coffee cake, the type is recipe. The name is party coffee cake. The keywords that they use, the recipe category is dessert. The recipe cuisine, American. Super easy. Don't overthink it. And then if you were to go and you were to look at the keywords that they've included, they've only included 2 keywords, and that's cake for a party and coffee. Got it. Super easy. So if you have a coffee cake, people are searching conversationally through Google Home, through Google Now. They're searching for cake for a party. Hopefully
it's interesting. And we'll we talk about this a little bit in Raquel's session, but the keywords, like you said, it's kind of this, for people that have been involved in any type of search engine optimization, it's an interesting thing, because it was kind of this outdated, like you don't use keywords anymore because people would keyword stuff and then it became irrelevant. So it's interesting to see this pop back up again. But my guess is that, like you said, it's used to inform somebody who's doing a voice search over doing a search on the web. So it's not like you're wanting to put in your actual keyword, but more of the words that people might use when they're searching for the thing that you're creating. Like you said, like a cake for a party, or like good cake for brunch, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Very good point. I like banana cream pie. We've used banana cream pie as an example many times. By the way, vloggers, I've yet to have someone send me a banana cream pie. Now, I've had some people send me banana muffins.
Nice.
So that's always a plus. I'm still working that banana cream pie.
It's getting warmer.
It's getting warmer there. But for a banana cream pie, that might be banana dessert. That might be something like a cream pie. Someone is looking to make a cream pie, that would be a good focus keyword for the for audio, for voice search. So just be aware. Don't overthink it. Don't and certainly absolutely do not spam this, folks. If you're putting 5, 6, 7, 10, don't do that. because that could hurt you because you can overdo certain things. This is one of them that is ripe for abuse. And when I found what happened was I woke up on the 1st of May to do some research, and I was running reporting, and I was the first to run across these new fields. And I immediately sent a tweet out asking, what is going on? Google's pushing out these new fields. And it just so happens that I had run into the beta. And 48 hours later, we got the update from Google that these were officially new fields. So there is a whole article in Search Engine Journal titled Major Recipe Structure Data Update that has all my thoughts on this.
Cool.
Definitely check that out. Good information.
Yep. A great article. I've read through it. We'll also be sending out an email with all of the resources that we mention here. So if you are frantically writing stuff down or trying to find them, we'll be sending that out so you don't have to worry about that after the bootcamp. And if you're watching this on Food Blogger Pro, we'll have those resources down below. So a couple of big takeaways. Number one, be aware of these things. Make sure that the recipe plugin you have has added those, or will it be adding them soon.
Definitely.
Recipes, we'll be adding the video one soon. All the other ones are added. The other thing that I think is important that you'd mentioned is that add the ones that are easy to add, like category and cuisine. If you don't have a video, it's not going to mean that like all of a sudden all your articles are going to go away or your blog posts aren't going to show up anymore. We're actually going to talk about that in the myths section in terms of recipes showing up higher because they include structured data or not. And it's an interesting thing to talk about. So some really good thoughts on the updates. And for those that are watching, make sure to stay tuned for the next session. We're going to talk some more about that just so we can really spend some time with that, make sure we understand it specifically around recipes. So let's move to this next section and talk about user intent. Can you talk about what user intent is and why that's so important?
Absolutely. I would say that I'm not, it's extremely serious. I would say that it's not hubris for me to say that user intent is by far the number one ranking factor in Google. How fast can you meet the needs of the user? What does that mean? Well, it means that if I have a recipe, how fast can I give users access to the information they're looking for, preferably the recipe card? How fast can I provide them the information they need to make this recipe perfectly, not only the first time, but the 100th time? And what can I do with regards to anticipating and answering questions that the user doesn't even know that they have? And that's a very, very important thing. The days of having a recipe where you have maybe one photo, a couple lines, and the recipe card are over. If you do that and expect to be successful, I think you're living in a dream world. And when I do an audit, that's one of the things that I really focus on is I will use focus groups. I have, trust me, I have access to plenty of people locally who want to do nothing at all but look at recipe sites on their phones. And they are great because they are run the gamut. Professionals, stay-at-home moms, college students, and I'll just go into the group and I'll ask them to do a quick focus group on this recipe site, and I take that feedback back and apply it to my audits, and it's always very illuminating. And that's what we want to do is we want to make sure that you understand that Google kind of moved away from keywords years ago. Many of you might be familiar with the Hummingbird update. Hummingbird happened several years back. I think it was about 2014, 2015 now. And what had happened was basically Google changed the engine. It's like you have a Corvette and you're actually changing the whole engine. That's what they did to their search results. And Hummingbird moved away from a keyword-based classification model. That's really the simplest way to say. They moved to things, not strings. Well, what does that mean? Well, the days of you trying to optimize for a focal keyword or a string of keywords is over. It was all about intent. It was all about understanding entities. And entity classification is very important for recipes. If you're writing up a post and you have a focus keyword, one of the very first steps you should be doing is going to Google, typing that focus keyword, and then looking at the related recipes and picking out what keywords Google's actually bolding down there. That's Google telling you, hey, these are some other related keywords or entity classifications that Google is using to refine intent around this. So one of the examples that you might want to think about is if you were writing a historical post on Abraham Lincoln, you need to research the fact that Google is looking for resources on Abraham Lincoln that involve related entities.
Yeah.
John Wilkes Booth, his wife Mary Todd, the Gettysburg Address. All those are known entities that are linked and classified with Abraham Lincoln, and the same can be said of most recipes.
And I think there's a couple really important things to pull out there that I think would be important for people to understand. Number one, I think just in general, sometimes we don't think about the fact that Google is always updating. So it's changing how it approaches content, how it looks at it, and it's always trying to get better at, and I think this is what you're saying, understanding and serving the best answer to the person that's using Google.
Absolutely.
User intent piece. So they're always trying to get better at that. So our job as content creators is figuring out how do we create content that as much as possible is really good for the end user. And what you're saying is, or what I hear you saying is this switch from like one specific keyword, like trying to rank for this one thing, to kind of being covering the basis of that subject, of which there's lots of little branches that come down underneath it. So it's not just one thing, but there's also additional things that are related to that. So
very much so.
Do you have an example in the recipe world what that might look like when creating content?
So a good example would be a pasta recipe, specifically a difficult pasta recipe that uses a unique form of pasta or that provides additional steps that are needed. You might go ahead and write up the post with the focal keyword being this kind of pasta. But then as we get down into the recipe, you're like, why this kind of pasta? Where is this pasta from? Why is it perfect for this recipe? By the way, here's a chef's tip. I tend to start the pasta first because I want to go ahead and give it time, or I want to, mix these other ingredients first because I need to give the pasta time to set because there's a certain al dente setting that I need or something along those lines. And then as I get down, I might have a section on related recipes. Here are some other related recipes that go great with this pasta. And then I get down to, by the way, if you're making this, you might come across this issue. And this is an issue that I probably found when I put the focus keyword into Google. For example, does this make it good? Can I freeze this? Is it good for leftovers? I tend to want to make sure that I ask and answer those questions when I'm putting together my recipe. So take your focus keyword, go into Google, and I want you not only to look at what Google is returning there at the bottom of the page by means of related results, but I also want you to look at what Google's ranking in the first 5, 6, 7 results. Click on those recipes. What are those other bloggers doing? Is there a specific pro tip in there or something like, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I should have let it set here because now if I do that for my own recipe, it's going to result in a substantially increased experience for the end result.
And when you're creating that content, should that be in the recipe card? Should people have that outside of the recipe card with like a header H2? So you have a H1
absolutely.
And H2. So you kind of are breaking it out into different sections, essentially.
Very much so. You want to make the big thing about this is that everything should be designed for a mobile-first surface, a mobile-first world, and that means shorter paragraphs. That means very easy to pull out snippets of information, and that means H2 or H3. So if you've got your recipe up here. Then you've got your first H2, what is this? You've got a second H2, here's how to make this. You've got a third H2, here are some issues that you may experience, and maybe you've got a fourth H2 right below above your recipe card that says, by the way, here are some related recipes that go well with this or that you may want to consider. Then we've got a recipe card down there. Now, when I put a recipe together, or when I tell users to put a recipe together, there's a specific approach that I absolutely believe works, and this is based on a review of the Google Quality Guidelines, which is a 160-page behemoth that unfortunately most bloggers should read. And when you read those guidelines, it's very clear that there are specific things that Google is looking for in a recipe. Google classifies recipes and recipe bloggers specifically as highest meat needs, meats needs, and lowest meats needs. And there's various different characteristics that they're looking for. A recipe that only has one photo, not really going to be a highest meats needs. A recipe that has detailed process shots, that has tips and tricks that show demonstrated expertise on the part of the author and the process, that's a highest meats needs. There are various things that Google is looking for there, and then they take that information and they use it to refine their algorithms. So these Google quality raters are visiting your sites all the time. There are basically hundreds of thousands of them worldwide that Google hires on a basis to just go in and grade sites. And then they take all that feedback and they send it up to Canada where Google Brain is based, and Google Brain uses that information to refine their algorithms. And that's basically the whole point of these Google quality raters there.
Yep.
But
and
user intent, very important.
It's interesting because those are actual people. Like, it's not a machine. It's not a
machine
robot crawling your site. Those are people coming and looking and saying, and those would be the people that classify or qualify a piece of content into those different categories. And
very much so.
Was this idea of highest meets needs. So idea being, this is an example of a piece of content that provides the most helpful type of information as it relates to this specific thing, that whether it be a banana.
Absolutely. I mean, there are 10 million banana cream pie recipes. How do you get on page 1 of Google for such a competitive keyword? And it's the same with everything else. You could have the best prime rib or beef Wellington recipe in the world, but if you can't translate that to a recipe and a recipe page that shows demonstrated higher user intent and expertise, you're not going to get that consideration.
So how do you know when to stop? Because you could continue answering every tiny little minute question of like, here's when you should put it in, what time of day should I cook a banana cream pie? Or like you could go on and on and on and answer these tiny questions. What would be considered the most important questions to answer?
It's a good question. So what I tend to tell people is this. I like people to download and install the Keywords Everywhere plugin. The Keywords Everywhere plugin is fantastic. It's a free add-on for Chrome and Firefox. It provides direct access to the Google API. You can get demonstrated keyword volume for various focus keywords right away so that you can understand what keywords are using. It makes no sense initially to have a focus keyword that only has 100 searches a month. I'm sorry, you can have the best recipe in the world. You're not going to generate many clicks from that. Now, that's a completely other topic, but it's something to keep in mind. Now, once you've had that installed, it's also going to populate keyword data on a plethora of other sites. Bing, Answer the Public, YouTube, Amazon. It's going to populate all keyword data on those sites. Now, it's going to be Google information. It's not going to be Amazon or YouTube information. But you want that information so that, for example, you could then go over to a site like Answer the Public and type in your focus keyword and see if there's any questions that users are answering about this. This is also, I would type in, for example, banana cream pie. I would go over to Answer the Public. And now that I have the Keywords Everywhere installed, I can now see populated data on those questions. Are there any questions that have 100, 200, 500, 1,000 search queries? Those are very important questions, clearly, that people might have. I might use that data to refine what questions I'm putting in.
Got it. And that's so that you said that was an extension, a Chrome extension?
That's a Chrome or Firefox extension, and it's free.
Got it. Okay, cool. So for those that don't use Chrome or Firefox, you can add these extensions, these little pieces. It's kind of like a plugin for WordPress that allow you to do these additional things.
Exactly.
So, again, with that, we'll link, if you're watching this on Food Blogger Pro, down below, or if you're watching it ahead of time in the Bootcamp, we'll link to that in the email that goes out after.
Yeah, and the good thing about that extension is it will populate the volumes of the questions that Google provides at the bottom of the focus keyword query in Google. So if I've typed in banana cream pie, I'm going to populate, there's a series of questions down below. Okay, so there's going to be some numbers next to those, and you want to look and see, okay, do any of these have any volume that I might want to consider adding to my recipe? Also, you need to look at the people also ask, PAA queries that Google is now populating at the top of Google for most queries now. These people also ask questions, continually populate down as like a collapsing menu. Look at those questions. Are those questions that you feel are popular? Now, those aren't going to populate with search data, but Google's clearly thinking enough of them to include them right at the top of the page. And so those are questions that you might want to consider answering in your recipe. But as you said, it's trial and error. You can definitely go a little crazy. And if you want examples of sites that are doing this extremely well, you can take a look at sites like Erin's Kitchen, ERRENS kitchen.com. She does a fantastic job with this. Also, Emily over at InsideTheRustedKitchen.com. And of course, there are various other sites out there, including your own, that do this, but maybe not as much as they could be doing.
And it's something that I've thought about. I heard this is on a much higher level, kind of more on a like B2B level, but there's a company that I'm not super connected with, but it's called Markee, and they do like AI, artificial intelligence analysis of content to suggest these exact things that you're talking about in a more automated way, but it's also super expensive software. So it's not
right. Most there are various entity classification tools out there, but none that are really super friendly for bloggers. If you Moz has a fantastic content tool that allows you to go in. If you're a Moz member and you're on this call, Moz has a keyword tool that will allow you to go in and put the focus keyword, and it will surface the questions for you. And it will provide the search volume for those questions. It's very popular. SEMrush really doesn't do a lot of that. SEMrush is more keyword specific. There's really no way to pull out those large. They have a keyword magic tool, but not as effective. So I tend to use a hodgepodge of various tools to do this.
Nice. And a couple other things here, but first I would like to point out the fact that my dream has been realized. Your Maine Coon didn't. What is your cat's name?
Ziggy.
Ziggy didn't make a true appearance, but Ziggy showed up in the reflection in the back of the.
Did he?
Yeah. So congratulations, Ziggy. You have officially appeared.
Ziggy, come on.
In the reflection of the photo or the frame that you have back there. So
yeah, I'm sure he's around. He will pop up. He's walking around downstairs now, wondering why I'm not getting up and letting him out of the office. So we'll see how that goes.
So one of the things that you've talked about before is this idea of EAT, E-A-T. Can you talk about what that is and why that is important?
EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. It is a hallmark and benchmark and cornerstone of the Google Quality Rater guidelines. It's something that Google has been pushing for years, and it's a way to separate subject matter experts from those who are not. You know, when Google initially had author rank, which was a failed experiment from several years ago, they said that they would reserve the right to bring that back. And they also said kind of, under their breath that, hey, we might be using something like this, but we're not calling it author rank. And that's really where EAT comes into fruition, which is it's a demonstrated expertise by the author of the content. Now, I am a big believer in demonstrated expertise. So when I do an audit, I'm immediately looking to see, okay, do I see a real person behind this blog? Is there a nice above the fold about me statement about this person on the blog? Right there, preferably on the right-hand side. And this is who I am. This is a little bit about my background. If I'm a trained chef, I'd like to see that because, again, I know Google Quality Raters look at that stuff. They might not treat the trained chef differently than another person, especially if the content's not as good. But nevertheless, it's a demonstrated example of your experience, of your expertise, and I'm all for that always. So I want to look for that on the blog, and then I want to see that sprinkled in to the recipe. If you've got a pro tip that shows a demonstrated, a clear understanding of what's involved here. Like I said, I tell users all this time, and it's kind of funny, but I do say this, and I tell bloggers, try to treat your audience as toddlers or drunk adults. And I say that in jest, but it's true. I want you to dumb down the recipe as much as possible so that if someone like Casey, who is not very good in the kitchen, can follow your recipe perfectly, provide the steps that you take for granted, provide and define concepts that you take for granted. If you mention a term for cooking, don't assume that the user knows what that is. Define that right in there or link out to more information. One of the many myths out there is that you should link out. That's terrible advice. You want to link out whenever it's useful to users, and those links should open in new windows. So you want to start thinking about, well, I just mentioned this cooking technique. I'm not going to find it in my recipe, but I'm going to link out to more information on it. Got it. I just mentioned that this recipe is got its start in this region of France. I'm going to link to that region of France so that users can get more information. Or if I mention that, okay, there's a specific technique, I'm not going to have time to go into this full technique about the fondant that I'm using on my cake, but here's a link to a video that goes into that. All right, so we just did a Ziggy release. So Ziggy was released to get fantastic. Get his food. But much like a Marvel movie, if you stick around until after, what we'll do is you'll be able to see a little Ziggy cameo at the end that we'll cut in after. So here we go. So to wrap up on kind of the user intent stuff, and I think the biggest takeaway for me is thinking about not just a keyword, but creating holistic content around that piece of content. Very much so. And if you are, and the idea being like maybe answering some questions and being strategic about things that are around that keyword. So, what happens if my chocolate chip cookies are flat? Like, absolutely. As an example for a chocolate chip cookies recipe, building that in, because that might be something that people search about,
they won't search just chocolate chip cookies recipe. They might search that question, and they
Absolutely.
can your piece of content for that. So what are some of the results that people could expect from this? Does it happen overnight? Does it take a long time? How do you know if it's working?
Well, it's increased user satisfaction. You're going to see an increase. Like I said, you want to tell the user what to do. So, I have them provide a teaser of the recipe at the top because I want to sell the click. Mm-hmm. Very important. I'm selling the user on continuing down to read the recipe. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm also pushing jump and print recipe buttons because there are two kinds of users navigating your content. There's the user on a mobile device that is in a hurry and they're specifically looking to qualify their time. Mm-hmm. You do not want to trap users on your page by making them go down through all of your content if they do not want to do that. Mm-hmm. Anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand how user intent works. So you want to meet the needs of your user, and so you allow them to jump down, take a look at the recipes card very quickly, qualify their experience. Okay, I know that this is only going to take 25 minutes. I can do this tonight. Mm-hmm. But if it says the prep time on it's an hour, I know that I can't do it after a hard day. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. Little bit of a teaser at the top to sell the user on what you've got, why it's better than anything else. Jump and print recipes. Then I've got a nice featured photo at the top, and then I get down into the recipe. This is why I chose this recipe. Here's heading number 1, which is this is the process involved in the recipe. Here's heading number 2, where here are some various issues that you may encounter when you're making this recipe. And then I've got down into header number 3, where I've got maybe the whole process shot section. It's process shot 1, process shot number 2, process shot number 3. And there's little notes next to those. I'm not just providing photo. Remember, you're designing for mobile devices, folks. Mm-hmm. There's nothing user-friendly about making users navigate through huge blocks of text or making them navigate through photo, add, photo, add, photo. Mm-hmm. There's nothing good about that. So you need to cut that out, and you need to really start thinking about, am I providing value in everything I'm doing here? And then right before we get down here to the recipe card, right at the top of the recipe card, I like to have a call to action. Mm-hmm. What do you want the user to do after they've made it all the way down here? Do you want them to leave a comment? Do you want them to leave a rating? Do you want them to follow you on social media? Mm-hmm. Then we get into the recipe card. The recipe card is all filled out. There's various things that you can do to optimize that recipe card. I know that Raquel, I think, is going to go into that. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, at the bottom, I might have another call to action there. Maybe it's an email offer. Maybe it's related recipes. Maybe whatever. Maybe it's you driving home. Hey, thanks again. Leave a comment. Rate this recipe. Mm-hmm. Something at the bottom, and then we get into the comments. So really, really simple. I mean, there's various approaches, and some people change that formula a little bit, but it works. Yep. I mean, when you read these crazy things like, oh, I got to add an audit with Casey, my traffic's up 1,000%. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't happen for every audit. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we do is take a user-first focus and making sure that you are meeting the needs of the user, okay? And you want to optimize for mobile. Mm-hmm. Now, optimizing for mobile doesn't mean that every sentence needs to have a return. I've heard some of that advice sent by some ad companies. It's incredibly poor advice. It's okay to have a couple sentences. Okay, it's not okay to have a return sentence after every sentence.
And by that you mean like return. One sentence return, sentence return.
One sentence paragraph, one sentence paragraph, one sentence paragraph. Look, you guys don't need to artificially inflate the length of your content. That's, again, a myth. Mm-hmm. You don't need to do that just to fit in more ads or because you think it has provided some ranking benefit. Mm-hmm. You are optimizing for mobile devices. We don't need to have 15 or 16 scrolls on a mobile device, especially if it's not needed. So just realize that you yourself pull out your phone. I'm always shocked at how many bloggers have not pulled out their phones mm-hmm. and tried to navigate their own pages and are shocked at how many times they are having a poor UX and wonder why they're not doing better. So be aware of that.
Yeah, huge takeaway. For those of you that haven't, and even just with any of the content you do in general, always go to your phone first to check that. So before you publish a post or a new page, you should be checking on your phone, not on your desktop, to see what people will see. And a good reminder of kind of that mobile first mentality with any of this stuff.
Very much so. Very much so.
So you mentioned a couple myths. We have some time left here, so let's do a little sprint through some of these myths and address these, because this is going to be really important for people to understand and to have the context around these. And one of the great things about this email that you sent over that outlined some of these is almost all of these also have an attached article that validates the myth. So we will send this along in the resources area as well, so you can check these out if you'd like to. But I think these are some important things. And if you don't understand it right away, if you're watching and you don't know what some of these words are, that's okay. You can kind of jot it down and do a little bit more research. We won't dive deep into the meanings of all of these. But let's roll through some of these and address what these are. So the first one is, the myth is that Google uses domain authority in their algorithmic calculations. So just really quickly address domain authority and what that is and why it's important to dispel that myth.
Right, and I get this a lot from like, oh my gosh, I had an audit or some SEO told me that the reason I'm not doing well is that my domain authority is low. Folks, domain authority is an invented metric from Moz. Moz invented that, okay? And it was, it's a way for them to logarithmically, and I'll explain that in a minute, classify sites on a scale to one another. Logarithmically means that the higher you go on the scale, the harder it is to see changes. So it's easier to have a Moz domain authority of 10 and 20 and move from 20 to 30 than it is to move from 30 to 40, as an example, okay? That's what logarithmically means. Now, Google has said and come out, and they came out as recently as October 2016 to say, we do not have overall domain authority. It's not something they've ever done. And it makes perfect sense about why they do that, because, you know, it's not something that they're able to really define internally. PageRank is a page-specific issue, and they still use PageRank internally, but domain authority is a myth. So I understand that some people would like to use that as a sign that this must be why that site is doing better than me. But domain authority is something that Google does not use now, nor has it ever used, and it's certainly not a ranking factor.
Got it. And the takeaway for that is, if somebody says, hey, your domain authority isn't great, you know that, okay, this is something from a company, Moz, that they use. It's a tool that exists, but it's not something that Google uses internally to...
Yeah, it's just it's a way for you to compare yourself to others. But again, it's Moz only data. It's based upon their linkscape. It's based upon their calculations.
Great.
That's it.
Cool. So the next myth we're going to talk about, bounce rate is a ranking factor with Google. So really quickly, what is bounce rate and why is this a myth?
Yeah, so Google, again, has come out multiple times. Matt Cutts came out in a webmaster video in 2014, and also recently Gary Iles was asked about this at various conferences, and he says that we have not ever used bounce rate in our ranking metrics. And the reason that is because it's a muddy signal. It's very hard to use, and also something can have incredibly high bounce rate and be the #1 result in Google.
Sure.
Let me give you an example. If someone was to type in the concert times for something, or if someone was to type in real-time news information and they were to see that in Google and click over to the site and immediately leave, it's 100% bounce rate, and yet there are sites that do that all the time. That's how bounce rate works. Okay, bounce rate is one of those things where it's just, it makes no sense for Google to use it because it can be exploited so much. For example, we can go ahead and set up a page with adjusted bounce rate by putting timing limiters in there. We can actually have Google Tag Manager fire tags after 10 seconds or 15 seconds or 20 seconds so that we can actually capture that session and start tracking those users more adequately. That'll plummet your bounce rate down considerably. If you could game it that easily, then this is really something that Google's going to take off and use in their own metrics.
Got it.
Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a kind of bounce rate that Google uses. And let me just clarify that by saying that many SEOs, myself included, believe that dwell time or browser view are more important metrics than, say, bounce rate. You know, how long does someone stay on the page and read an article, for example, and then maybe they leak off, you know, when they're done with that, they link off completely. That's 100% bounce rate in many cases, but they stayed on the page for several minutes. Another good example is if you were to type in, and this is also going to go to our word count example too, so maybe I should save it, but if you were to type in, is it Christmas into Google, the #1 result is a site that says, isitchristmas.com. And if you were to click on that, it's a one-word website. And the answer is no. It's not Christmas.
Unless
people see that. Unless it's Christmas, and then it turns yes. People click on that one-page website, which has one word on it, and then they immediately hit their back button and leave. It's kind of a novelty thing. It's a 100% bounce rate website, and it's been #1 for years. So don't believe that this jumping past content or the fact that bounce rate is something that Google uses. There's just no evidence to support it. None.
And there's a difference between bounce rate, which would be somebody coming to a piece of content and then either leaving or going somewhere else, and searching for a term, clicking on that page, and then going back to the search results page, and then clicking on a different piece of content. So would that be viewed as different, and does Google treat that differently?
Well, the more accurate example of that would be pogo sticking. Pogo sticking is a concept whereby I'm looking at recipes, and I'm in Google search. I click on one. I look at it very quickly. I don't like what I see.
Yep.
I click my back button and I select another result. That's the kind of user behavior that Google might be using, especially considering they can collect it through Chrome very easily.
Sure.
That's called pogo sticking. That's not really bounce rate. That's a user-centric metric where they looked at the content very quickly. They maybe didn't necessarily find what they wanted, and they moved on to something else. Mm-hmm. Completely different concept. And there's possibilities that's something that you'd want to look at. But dwell time is also something that I would urge those of you on the call to look up. Find out what's the difference between dwell time. It's the time the user visits on the page, the constant answers the needs of the user. Did they spend 2 seconds on it? Did they spend 2 minutes? Did they spend 15 minutes? Mm-hmm. You can track all this. You can add advanced analytics tracking or adjusted bounce rate or various filters, or you can even put scroll tracking. We call it scroll tracking user attribution in Google Analytics. I know a lot of food bloggers are put off by Google Analytics. Jeff Analytics had a great presentation at the Everything Food Conference. It's free. Mm-hmm. Look for it now. You can find it, read it. He's very good with analytics. He has lots of good information, dumbs it down. He talks about attribution tracking. He talks about adjusted bounce rate. He talks about scroll tracking. All great concepts that bloggers should be aware.
Cool. That's great. Another myth that you addressed earlier is this one of Google ranks sites on exact match keywords or focus keywords. We talked about that and how it's things, not strings. So it's not this exact match keyword. It's kind of this general subject, and making sure that you're addressing all of that. Another myth that you said was food bloggers should be using disavow files, or that this certain company, SEMrush, is telling me I have toxic links and need one. So what is a disavow file, and why is it not a critical thing for us to be aware of or to be using?
Absolutely. So a disavow file was introduced many years ago in the times of Penguin. Penguin was a link-based algorithm that really was being pushed out intermittently by Google for many years, and it started in about 2012. Accelerated in about 2014, 2015. And under Penguin, the bad links would hurt you. Toxic links would hurt you. You would find that Google would push out this Penguin algorithm, and it would be like they just kicked you in the shins. Mm-hmm. Your site would just suddenly stop ranking competitively for various keywords until you got rid of these links. And so Google launched the disavow file as a way for them to automate a lot of this. You could find bad links that you didn't like, and you would go ahead and put them in this disavow file, and you would go ahead and submit it through Search Console. And many, many sites use this considerably. Mm-hmm. When Google moved Penguin to be part of the main search algorithm, in other words, they automated it in about September of 2016 actually, they basically also changed both the importance and the accepted best practice of the use of disavow files. Now Google is saying that, okay, we're finding most of the links for you. Mm-hmm. So you don't need to, we're just going to find these bad links, and we're going to stop the flow of page rank to them, so you don't really need to worry about disavow files.
Got it.
Well, in many cases, though, and let me just clarify because I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, most food bloggers just do not have enough toxic links to warrant a disavow file. It just doesn't happen.
And a toxic link would be if something was hacked or spam or porn or something like that. Where
Exactly. If these tools,
for most food bloggers.
Be it SEMrush or Moz or someone, these tools are just best guesses. And in many cases, they'll falsely classify links. And the worst thing that you as a food blogger or a do-it-yourself or a lifestyle blogger can do is mistakenly disavow a link that you thought was a bad link but was really helping you rank. Don't do that. You don't want to cut off link quality or link equity that might be helping you rank. So there are very finite cases where you should be using a disavow file. I had an audit the other day with a site. It was clear that her domain name was very close to, unfortunately, some porn-specific names. Mm-hmm. So she had a lot of very low-quality links to her site. Mm-hmm. She was correctly setting up a disavow and just dropping those links in and submitting the disavow. Mm-hmm. That's it. It was totally fine for her to do. Same way with hacked links, or if someone was building in links and you know that you don't want to be associated with those, drop them in a disavow file and move on. But the only reason that most food bloggers out there would ever need a disavow file is if you have a manual action link-based penalty.
And you get notified if you had that.
You get notified. And if you've got one of those, then two things. We want to go ahead and set up a disavow file and start disavowing some links that maybe you weren't aware that the SEO you were working with built in for you. Or maybe there are links that you shouldn't have gotten in the first place and you can't get them removed. So we'll toss them in the disavow file. But the vast majority of people on this call are never going to need a disavow file, nor should you be paying someone to do a disavow file for you.
Got it. Another myth here, URLs should absolutely match the title of your post, or in our case for Food Blog, the recipe. So why is this a myth, and why can we kind of let this one go?
Yeah, Google has said completely opposite. As far back as 2014, when you look at some of the Matt Cutts videos, URL structure has been a deprecated ranking factor for years, especially keywords in a URL. Further, we're moving to a mobile-first world. URLs need to be shorter. There is no reason for you to have a beef Wellington recipe with peas and carrots and have all of those reflected in your URL. Does it do anything for users? And there's certainly no SEO benefit for that. Instead, the better option for users would be /beef/Wellington or beef-Wellington. That is a substantially easier URL to share. That is a substantially easier URL to see on mobile devices. So I will provide some links to this. This isn't even disputed. You do not need to worry about having these incredibly long URLs. And Yoast, just like everything else, is just a tool. Sometimes its recommendations are just extremely wrong. And they're doing that because they're trying to get everything together for all cases. So just don't worry about that. Always try to change the URL before you publish. A lot of people are like, oh, I didn't even know I could change the URL. I'm like, yeah, the slug, you can edit the slug to whatever you want before you hit publish.
Got it. And the title is still important. Like, that is an important keyword ranking factor, but the title doesn't have to match the URL exactly.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And you're not going to shoot yourself in the foot by having the title not match the URL, or the fact that your beef Wellingtons with carrots and peas isn't the very first thing on the page or the very first thing in your meta description. That kind of outdated thinking is just not appropriate these days in a mobile first and user intent first world. You don't need to do that. Google can rank all that content fine. Go back to the entities classification. Pull up RankBrain. RankBrain is really what changed all of this. When I think I might have mistakenly mentioned previously about Hummingbird. Hummingbird is completely different than RankBrain. So if you were confused by that, my apologies. But RankBrain is really the engine that Google changed. RankBrain is now how Google is classifying these queries, and they're even using it to classify all of these never before searched for queries, which are basically billions every day. It's insane. So always think of your users. Shorter is better. Just again, preface this by saying, do not change URLs once you publish them. There's very little reason ever to change URLs. In fact, John Mueller with Google last week just published an article that says, hey, do not change URLs. If you're updating content, try to use the same URL. He absolutely said that. Just look at it. So don't feel that you need to change a URL, because every time you're changing URLs, that means you have to redirect the old URL to the new one. You are going to lose a little of authority with that redirect, regardless of what you've heard. Okay? Every time.
Yep. Cool. So a couple takeaways. If you are updating content, you don't have to update the URL, because then you'd have to redirect it, and you don't want, as much as possible, you don't want to be redirecting content. And when you are publishing it, as much as possible, keep that URL nice and clean. But you can still go for a long tail keyword, but it doesn't have to be in the URL. And I think that's a really good takeaway.
Absolutely. Very important. Google knows all about this stuff. They don't.
Cool.
They can pull the connections.
Cool. We have time for a few more here. That all external links should be no follow, or that linking out hurts your site. So this is a myth. Why is that a myth?
Well, because again, that's how the web works. We want to link out to other sites. That's how the link sphere works. We want to link out. There's no reason to no follow all your external links. It makes your site look extremely strange in the whole overall view of things. It really does. That's just not how the web works. And Google says, don't do this. It's a very poor practice. There's no benefit for doing this. The only time you should no follow an external link is if it's affiliate in nature, it's sponsored in nature, or you just don't trust the link. That's it. Everything else, no follow. Now, I think that, let's see if that is another, let's talk a little bit about that, because I see this a lot.
Yeah.
With regards to the links, please, bloggers, You do not need to have all of your internal links open in new windows. I don't know where that trend started, but it's extremely poor for users. There's nothing I hate to see more than for me to do an audit, and every time I click on a link internally, I'm opening up a new window. That is not how UX works, and that is not an accepted best practice. Only time you should have links that open up in new windows are if they're external links, because we're trying to keep those users on our site. If we're going to link out to another resource for them, fantastic. I'll have that link open up in a new window. But there is no evidence anywhere that having internal links open in new windows does anything but piss off your users.
Yeah,
so
and
please don't do that.
Yeah, and an important point there that you made, internally, if you have pages on your own site, link to those within the same page. So don't open it in a new tab. If you are doing it externally, you can have those. There's a little bit more leeway for how those links are treated, because idea being maybe you want to keep your page open and active, so they open it in a new tab if it's an external link. So that's a great takeaway. We're coming to the end here, but one of the things that I think would be really good to end on before we kind of wrap up would be structured data. And I think a lot of people think that structured data, which would be like the recipe image, it would be the nutrition information, calories, things like that. They think that if I have that information, then I'm going to show up higher in Google search results. That's a myth. Why is that a myth?
Right. And Google has said, John Mueller came out on April the 3rd and said, I get this question a lot. We do not use structured data as a ranking benefit. Structured data has always been a way for you to increase conversion. Structured data in the search results qualifies users. It's prettier. If I've got a recipe page, if I've got a result for banana cream pie and my result here has a picture and it's using breadcrumbs, and I've got some photos, or I've got the aggregate rating markup there showing stars, and there's 203 comments, or I know that this recipe takes 43 minutes to make and it has 320 calories. Those are all what we call rich snippets. Rich snippets are visual representations of structured data, and that increases conversion, CTR. That's why if you ever get a spammy structured data markup penalty and you lose all of your structured data, you lose all of your rich snippets, you tend to have a traffic loss because your conversion goes down. You don't have a ranking loss. Your rankings don't change. Google doesn't penalize you, but it feels like a penalty because you've lost those nice visual representations, which increase conversion and click-throughs. So structured data itself is not now, nor has it ever been a ranking factor. If you go to the intro to structured data page on Google, it even says it right there in nice big letters.
And I think that's a super important takeaway. We chat about that a little bit with Raquel too, but the idea being it's not going to make you show up higher, but it's going to increase, like you said, the click-through rate.
Exactly, really conversion.
Long-term for
very much so.
Of your site. For SEO. Anything? We have a couple other myths here that we didn't get to, but want to be respectful of time here for people. Would there be one more that we didn't get to that you feel like, hey, this would be a really important one to chat about, or to
publishing frequency? I know publishing frequency is a big one. So let's talk a little bit about publishing frequency. A lot of people believe that if you publish more, you'll rank higher. Well, that's on its just saying that, by the way, is a myth. Here's the clarification on that. Whenever you publish new content, you are generating new pings and new requests to Google to crawl your content. If you are publishing high quality content and you publish high quality content 3 times a week, you are going to you're going to generate increased pings. You're going to generate increased crawls of your content, and those increased crawls will generate what are called freshness boosts. And these freshness boosts are a way for Google to go in and look at the timeliness of the content and rank that accordingly. And it can be like a rising tide lifting all boats because you're generating increased crawls. However, if your content is low quality, or you are just continuing to publish content that your recipe cards aren't enhanced, you're not doing the checklist that we've talked about today a little bit, or that Raquel is going to talk about in the next session, and the content is just not high quality, you can publish every day all you want and it's not going to make any difference. Now, again, with most things, there are citations for this, folks. John Mueller just said on Twitter last week, we do not rank sites higher that publish more. Can't be more clear than that. He specifically said that sites are not like machines that should just pump out content. The content needs to be high quality. The content needs to be of the value that we would treat it accordingly. So again, this isn't just me saying this. This is me saying that, in many cases when we do an audit, one of the things that I recommend is just updating and republishing old content based upon a better checklist that we're now going to share. Because the old content that you had just hasn't connected with users. Most bloggers on this call have hundreds, if not thousands, of old posts that are just sitting in your search console and have generated no clicks over the last 28 to 90 days. So you want to start thinking about buckets. This is content that I can update and republish now. Bucket number 2, this is content that is seasonal. I know now what I need to do to make this content better. I'm going to update it as I get closer to the necessary seasonal trend. And then bucket number 3 is just content that, wow, I can't even believe I ever published this in the first place. Let's get that off my site. Let's go index that. But the better option is just to 404 it and move on.
Sure. Cool. That's great. Really good advice here. A lot of actionable stuff for people to move on, to learn more about. Casey, where can people follow up with you, find out what you're up to, if they're interested in working together, connect with you? Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So you can find me through my site, MediaWise. That's MEDIAWYSE.com. And you can type in MediaWise on Facebook and come to my Facebook page, read a little bit about me. I do a lot of site auditing there. Unfortunately, there is a long wait. That's good. But nevertheless, if you have a quick question, I'm also in the food blogging forums, and I participate quite heavily in some of the food blogging groups on Facebook, Food Bloggers Friends, and Food Blogging Central, or Food Blogger Central, one of those two. Yeah, and I'm here to help you. But again, I think there's a lot of, like I said, incorrect information out there. Use this podcast, look at some of the interviews that we've done in the past, take Raquel's training that's coming up to heart, and avail yourself of the forum. We'd love to have you as a member of Food Blogger Pro. Awesome.
Casey, really good to connect. And we will now roll for people that stuck around after this, we will cut in Ziggy's feature, and Ziggy will have his screen time. So thanks, Casey. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to staying connected.
My pleasure.
All right. Hey, let's do a huge round of applause for Casey. Wasn't that awesome? And Ziggy. Let's give a round of applause for Ziggy as well. So just a quick update, MediaWise.com, that's Casey's site, and where you can contact him and follow along with what he's doing and what he's up to. And let's do an official round of applause for Casey in that presentation. Wasn't that an incredible amount of information? And such good stuff. So we are coming to the end of our first session for the day, the SEO Bootcamp. We have 2 more. We're going to talk with Raquel next, and Raquel's going to talk about some of the things that are important on a real ground level basis for recipe plugins. And Raquel does the product development. She's the product lead for WP Tasty, and so works with a lot of the plugins that we have there, all the plugins that we have there. Tasty Recipes, which we're going to be talking about, Tasty Links, and Tasty Pins. We're going to be talking about recipes from an SEO perspective. So what I'm going to do now is we have just a little bit of time left. And I'm going to share a few other things here. And what I'm most excited about is talking to you about Food Blogger Pro. So we are doing this boot camp as kind of a kickoff event for Food Blogger Pro, which enrollment for Food Blogger Pro opens in just a little bit. So we are going to be opening enrollment for Food Blogger Pro officially for you bootcamp attendees right now. So if you want to become a part of Food Blogger Pro, if you want to join that community, I'm going to be talking about how to do that in a little bit. But a few other things real quick here. Number one, replays of all of these are available until May 18th. Those are free. So if you want to check those out, you can do that for 24 hours. And you can come back to this URL. Those will be available here. But what do you do after the bootcamp? Food Blogger Pro. This is our community of food and recipe creators. We have almost 3,000 members that are a part of that from all around the world. And we had some people talking about that are actually members. So I'd love to hear from you. I have the little chat info down below. If you're a member of Food Blogger Pro, would love to hear if you are tuning into this live because we have just a really incredible group of people that are part of that community. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to share my screen. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Food Blogger Pro, you can learn a little bit about what it is and how it works. So if you can see my screen, give me a got it in the chat area, and then I'll know that you can see what I have here and that I am coming through on your end. So here's how it works. Food Blogger Pro is a community of people that are building and creating incredible websites in the food and recipe space. The community aspect is so important because, as you can see here, there's a lot of conversations that are happening each and every day on the community forum. The kind of questions that we see in the chat area, but these are in a forum, and we're going back and forth and having conversations about these. For instance, Rachel, who's actually on the call today, hey, Rachel, has a question, and it's actually a poll. What recipe card format do you use? Somebody had advice that they wanted on picking a really fast theme that's really good for SEO. We have questions about building traffic. So somebody is sharing a Pinterest board, and the Pinterest board is a place where it's shared and you can put your pins into this shared board. Somebody's asking about Tailwind, which is also a Pinterest tool, and MailChimp. All of these discussions are happening here on the community forum. You can scroll through here and see all of the different people that are having these conversations about really important blogging and business building type questions and categories. We also talk about generating income. Somebody's asking about Google AdSense. A lot of questions around photography and video, and people talking about the best ways to do that. Speaking of video, we have over 300 different step-by-step tutorials for you as it relates to the different things that are most important. For example, we talk about really important plugins that you could be using, like VaultPress, and understanding recipe plugins and how those work. Yoast SEO, which we talked about a lot today. So we go through step by step, talk through the process of using those plugins. And the other thing that we really love is this live area. So we do a live Q&A like this. Sometimes we have experts, sometimes it's Lindsay and I. We also do a happening now where we share behind the scenes the things that we are doing and the different updates that we're making for our business and for our blog. And these are really fun for me to do because I love the live interaction type stuff like we're doing right here. So this is Food Blogger Pro, and we are in the middle of this. Today is the kickoff for Food Blogger Pro. It is the first time that we are doing enrollment for Food Blogger Pro. And we're doing something that I'm really excited about. And we're kind of building a little thing that we're calling the Bootcamp Bundle. And the Bootcamp Bundle is for anybody that signs up for a yearly membership to Food Blogger Pro, which you can see if you just scroll down. There'll be this little button down below. And if you're watching real time, there's also a link that will be dropped in the chat area. And the Bootcamp Bundle is a yearly membership to Food Blogger Pro, which comes at a big discount. It's also 1 year of access to NutriFox. And the last thing is this thing called the SEO Action Group, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit and what that is and how that works. But first, I wanted to share a few of these testimonials that people have given for Food Blogger Pro. Michelle said, "Thanks for all the how-to videos. I never would have known about doing all this stuff for my own food blog. I feel like I've gone from preschool to college in regards to being a food blogger, even though I have been blogging for 3 years. Thank you, guys. You rock." Jeff said, "I truly believe the smartest decision I made was when I decided to go for it to purchase this service." And then this was a comment somebody left, and I won't read through all of this. You can check it out and see it. But this was somebody that when we talked about Food Blogger Pro on Pinch of Yum, they talked about how helpful it was as they went through the setup process. So the big question that people always have is like, how much does it cost if I wanted to join? So if you've looked at online courses online before, you know that there can be a really high price point for those. And they can be $2,000. A lot of times you see these like $1,997, $1,200, $997, $500. But we're super proud to offer Food Blogger Pro at an affordable rate that we feel like is accessible and also is equal in multiples to the value that you'll be able to get out of it if you engage with the forums, if you join in and watch the videos, and if you seek out and implement the advice from the Food Blogger Pro experts that are a part of the forum. And we're just super, super proud of that. And as much as possible, we want to make it accessible to as many people as possible. We know that it's not something that everybody can do, but we want to make it not ridiculously expensive. So we're super proud of that price. And if you want to get that Bootcamp bundle that I talked about, you can go to foodbloggerpro.com/bootcamp-bundle. And it has these 3 things that are a part of it. So Food Blogger Pro, you get everything right away when you sign up. None of the content is dripped out. You're not restricted to anything. You have all access to Food Blogger Pro. And we also have access to a tool called Nutrifox, which if you go to nutrifox.com, you can see usually that's an $89 a year tool. But with any yearly membership to Food Blogger Pro, you automatically get Nutrifox. And then we're doing this thing in June. We're doing something called the SEO Action Group. And it's not going to be new information. It's not going to be any secret tips or tricks, but it's simply going to be the Food Blogger Pro members, any yearly Food Blogger Pro member. We're going to create a new place on the forum, and we're going to go through and keep each other accountable to implement some of these really important things. So it's less about really mind-blowing new information. There's not going to be any new information. It's a lot of the stuff that we're going to be covering today in these sessions that we're doing, but it's more about the accountability to actually implement those things and some tools that you can use along with it, including a spreadsheet checklist that we used when we recently went through and kind of combed through all the Pinch of Yum content. So that'll be a 1-month accountability group to go through, make these updates, and other people that will be doing that along with you. So it'll be an accountability group to help make some of these updates and changes, which sometimes it's you can get the information and then you have to implement it, and that's the hard thing. And so we're super excited to offer that for all yearly Food Blogger Pro members, and you get that with part of this bootcamp bundle. And enrollment wraps up May 31st. So we talked about Nutrifox. We talked about the SEO action group that we're calling it, the accountability group for making some of these updates. And then you also get access to all of these replays. So this will be merged into Food Blogger Pro and will be accessible to you after the fact. And one thing that I wanted to mention down below here, if you don't want to do Nutrifox or the SEO action group, we have a monthly plan, and you can sign up for that. That's $29 a month. And you can go to bootcamp-monthly to get access to that. So that is the bootcamp bundle. What I want to do now is we still have some people hanging out and would love to hear from anybody. Number one, if we have any members, would love to hear from you and what section you go to the most on Food Blogger Pro. So if you are a forums person, if you love going there, maybe it's the live Q&As, maybe you get a lot of value out of the videos. Would love to hear from you. And then I also would love to hear from people that have any questions specifically about what Food Blogger Pro is. And Elizabeth says she stocks the forums. So that's great. You don't have to be somebody that's always posting, but great to be able to stock the forums and to look through those and see what people are talking about. And I will hang out here for a little bit and answer any questions that you have, or would also love to hear from people if you have feedback on it. So current members, you could maybe answer some of the questions too if those come up in the chat. And Katie, thanks for the kind words. Biggest fan of the forum and videos. Also really like the podcast. Highly recommend 124.5, which is featuring Katie. Sandy says she checks the forums every day, watch most of the videos, and go back to them for a refresher, which is awesome. And Make Ahead Meal Mom says the videos right now and hoping to use the forums more for the second year. That's really interesting because we hear that a lot from people. They get in, they watch through the videos, they get caught up, they feel really good about it. And then what they do is they jump into the forums and they kind of go into the forums for the real time type stuff once they've laid that foundational information down. So the question here is coming in. I don't have a blog, but I have a YouTube channel and Instagram page. Will this be something I could apply on my sites? So for you, I would say the best place to go would be the videos and then also the forum. You can ignore the blog stuff, but we have a lot of videos on photography and videos on videos. So how to shoot better videos, which we talk about from a recipe perspective, but that would be a good place to check out. And Holly says 1% Infinity, get better in small steps every day. Holly, I love that. That's something that we talk about. That's so important and really, really a big part of how we think about the content creation that we do. So really fun to hang out with you guys here today to talk about these important things. One more round of applause for Casey coming on and sharing all of his information and all of the really important stuff that we need to consider as we're thinking about optimizing our sites from a search perspective. And thank you for tuning in live for everybody in the chat. I always love love these conversations that we are having, and love this community as well. We're so honored to be a part of it. And the people that we work with every day on Food Blogger Pro, on these calls, all of this stuff is so fun for us. And it's because we have this incredible community. And that is you watching these videos. You make it fun. And because of your hard work and hustle and all of those things, we're just really honored to be a part of it. Also, would love to give a big round of applause for Alexa, who has gone above and beyond in getting everything ready for these. And she's been in the chat a little bit, but what you don't know is how much work goes into doing these. And Alexa has been behind the scenes working like crazy. So if you got anything out of these sessions, we need to give Alexa a big round of applause, and excited to talk to Raquel in a little bit to continue having some of these important conversations and to continue learning. So I'm going to sign off here, do a little water break, and then we'll be back here in about a half an hour to continue our one-day boot camp. And so until then, we'll see you guys on the other side, and excited to keep learning and to keep going. And it's going to be great. Thanks, guys, and we will see you soon.